The storm broke the night open. Rain slammed against the stone walls of the manor as Tessa ran, barefoot, her thin nightdress plastered to her skin. Her heart thrashed violently in her chest, matching the thunder that clawed across the sky. Behind her, the iron gates clanged shut, her husband's men already shouting, already searching. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she knew she would break. Her breath came out in sharp, painful bursts as she sprinted down the muddy road, her feet slipping, her legs trembling. Blood trickled from the cut on her temple where Matthew had struck her minutes earlier. His words still rang in her ears. "You are mine. You will never leave this house alive." The storm swallowed the memory, but not the terror. Tessa clutched the cloak she'd stolen from the kitchen chair, too thin, too small, but better than running into the night with nothing. Every part of her screamed to stop, to hide, to disappear, but she forced herself forward, into the wind that pushed her back like a warning. Lightning lit up the world for a split second, and the forest appeared before her like a living beast. The Forbidden Woods. A place whispered about since childhood. A place no human dared enter. Wolves roamed there, massive, unnatural ones. And deeper still, something darker. Something ancient. Something that answered to no king. Tessa had never believed the stories. But tonight, she didn't care if they were true. Anything was better than going back. A sharp branch tore her ankle as she crossed the forest edge, but she kept going. Branches whipped her face. The ground sank under her feet. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, slithering between the trees. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Or was that thunder at all? She stumbled over a fallen log and crashed onto the wet earth, biting back a sob. Her fingers shook violently as she pushed herself to her knees. The forest felt heavier than it should, as if the air itself watched her intrude. For a moment, she let herself imagine a warm bed, a quiet life, a world where she wasn't trapped in a marriage sealed by fear and cruelty. Her chest tightened. That world was gone now, burned the day Matthew revealed who he truly was. A monster wearing a nobleman's smile. Another flash of lightning lit the path, and she saw it, a faint outline of an old wooden structure just beyond the trees. A cabin. Half collapsed, weather-beaten, possibly abandoned, but shelter. With the last of her strength, Tessa pushed to her feet and limped toward it, rain blurring her vision. Her hands shook as she yanked the creaking door open. Cold air and old dust greeted her. The moment she stepped inside, the storm muffled to a distant roar. She slid down against the wall, chest heaving, trying not to sob too loudly. She had escaped. For now. But her husband would come. He always did. And if he sent his hunters, they would find her scent. Even the storm couldn't hide her for long. Tessa curled into herself, pressing a hand to her aching ribs. The cabin was small, one room, a broken table, rotting shelves, and an old fireplace filled with ash. A tattered fur blanket lay on the floor beside a broken chair. It wasn't much. But it was the first place that had felt safe in years. Outside, the wind howled like something alive. The forest creaked, whispered, breathed. And somewhere in that darkness, eyes watched her. Tessa didn't know it yet, not tonight, but she had not run into the forest to escape her fate. She had run straight into it. The cabin groaned under the weight of the storm. Wind screamed between the warped wooden boards, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers. Tessa curled in the corner beside the fireplace, shivering uncontrollably as rain pounded the roof in violent sheets. For a moment, The silence inside felt almost sacred, an unexpected sanctuary after a night of terror. But the storm outside was relentless, hammering the cabin as if trying to force its way in. Her breath fogged in the cold air. The cloak she clutched was soaked through. She rubbed her arms, trying to bring warmth back into her fingers. She needed fire. She dragged herself toward the hearth, pushing aside old ash and brittle twigs. Her hands shook violently as she tried to strike two old pieces of flint she'd found buried beneath the dust. Nothing. Her vision blurred. Exhaustion pressed on her like a weight. She tried again. Sparks flew, then died. "Please, just once," she whispered to no one, or perhaps to the forest itself. This time, a small spark caught. A faint glow. Then a slow, crackling flame bloomed in the darkness. Heat. Light. Safety. For the first time that night, Tessa allowed herself to breathe. She pulled the tattered fur blanket closer and wrapped it around her shoulders, sinking down beside the fire. The warmth bit into her frozen skin, painfully at first, then soothing. Her heartbeat slowed. Her eyelids fluttered. Outside, thunder cracked like the sky had been torn open. Then, something else. A cry. Faint. High-pitched. Carried by the wind. Tessa sat up instantly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. There it was again, a sharp, desperate yelp, swallowed by the rain but unmistakable. An animal. A small one. In distress. "No," she whispered, hugging her chest. "Not now. I can't." Another cry. This one weaker. Something inside her broke. Tessa wasn't the kind of woman who ignored pain, not after surviving so much of it. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed the blanket, threw it around her shoulders, and pushed the cabin door open. The storm slapped her in the face with icy rain. Her hair whipped wildly as she stepped into the night. The forest looked alive, branches thrashing, shadows shifting, the wind howling through trees that bent and swayed like towering beasts. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the ground in flashes of white. And then she saw it. Down the small slope behind the cabin. A tiny wolf pup struggled in a rushing stream, the current dragging it under the water. Its paws flailed weakly, head bobbing up only to be forced back down by the torrent. Tessa didn't think. She ran. Her feet slipped in the mud, but she fought harder, leaping down the slope and plunging into the freezing water. The cold hit her like a blade, stealing her breath, but she lunged forward, grabbing the pup just as the current pulled it deeper. Its tiny body trembled in her hands. "I've got you," she gasped, voice shaking. "I'm here." The pup whimpered, a sound so small and broken that it tightened something deep inside her chest. Carefully, she held it against her body and climbed out of the stream, stumbling on the slippery bank. The storm roared around her, but she shielded the pup with her own body, sprinting back toward the cabin. The door slammed behind her as she entered, locking out the fury of the storm. Breathless, dripping wet, Tessa crouched beside the fire again. She wrapped the pup in the warm blanket, rubbing its fur gently with trembling fingers. "You poor thing. You're freezing." The pup's eyes cracked open, two glowing amber orbs that reflected the firelight. Unusual. Unsettling. Almost intelligent. Tessa hesitated for a moment, then tightened her hold on the trembling creature. "It's all right," she whispered softly. "You're safe now." The pup let out a weak huff and curled into her lap as if it understood. Outside, thunder growled. Trees snapped. Something roared deep in the forest. Tessa's heart skipped. She didn't know it yet, not fully, not consciously, but by saving that tiny bundle of fur, she had changed her fate. And in the darkness just beyond the tree line, dozens of glowing golden eyes blinked open, watching the cabin. Waiting. Because she hadn't rescued a wolf pup. She had rescued the future of a kingdom. The storm raged on long into the night, but inside the small cabin, the world had narrowed into something soft and fragile, just Tessa, the fire, and the trembling wolf pup curled against her. Its fur was still damp, little chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. She shifted closer to the fire, cradling the pup under the old blanket she had wrapped around them both. "There you go," she whispered, stroking its tiny head with gentle fingers. "You're safe now. I promise." She didn't know where the promise came from. It slipped out of her before she could stop it, instinctive, protective, the same way she had always tried to protect herself, even when no one else would. The pup's amber eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, locking onto hers. There was something strange about them. A depth. A presence. Almost like staring into the eyes of something much older. Tessa blinked and shook her head. "You're just scared," she murmured softly, brushing the wet fur from its face. "Just like me." The pup gave a faint, almost understanding whine and nudged its nose into her ribs. The small gesture nearly pulled a smile from her exhausted lips. In the flickering firelight, the cabin looked a little less hostile. Shadows danced gently on the walls, and the warmth seeped slowly back into her bones. The terror that had been gripping her chest for hours loosened enough for her eyes to grow heavy. She leaned back against the wall, one arm protectively around the pup. Her fingers combed through its fur until her hands stilled. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was the pup's tiny sigh, and the storm beginning to quiet outside. Sleep did not remain peaceful for long. A strange warmth spread through the room, subtle at first, like a breath against her skin. Then stronger, like a presence filling the air. Something shifted outside. A twig snapped. Then another. Snow crunched beneath heavy steps. The pup in her lap tensed in its sleep, ears twitching. Tessa didn't wake. But the forest was awake. Very awake. Outside the cabin, the storm clouds parted just enough for the moon to slip through, thin and silver, like a blade slicing through the darkness. In that pale light, shapes moved silently between the trees. Massive shapes. Wolves. Not ordinary wolves, but towering, muscled beasts with thick coats and glowing golden eyes that reflected the moonlight like molten fire. They approached the cabin in a perfect ring, their paws barely making a sound on the wet earth. One stepped forward, the largest of them all. Its fur was black as midnight, streaked with silver like lightning scars. Golden eyes burned with fury and something else. Recognition. The moment the wind carried the scent of the pup from inside the cabin, the great wolf let out a low, rumbling growl that shook the branches overhead. His heir. His nephew. Here, with a human woman. The pack leader lowered his head, sniffing the air again. A second scent hit him, faint, trembling, human, and something strangely familiar beneath it. The great wolf's muscles tensed, hackles rising. A human had touched royal blood. A human had saved him. A human had altered fate. The air around him vibrated with barely contained power. Even the wolves behind him lowered themselves instinctively, sensing the shift in their king's aura. Slowly, the Alpha King stepped toward the cabin door. 1 step. 2. 3. His breath was hot in the cold air. He could smell her fear lingering on the threshold. He could smell her exhaustion. He could smell the warmth of her body holding his air. His growl deepened, something primal and ancient crackling beneath it. A storm far more dangerous than the one outside was gathering. Inside, Tessa stirred faintly, unaware of the circle tightening around her. Unaware of the golden eyes watching her from the shadows. Unaware that as she slept, the king of wolves lowered his massive head, and inhaled her scent like a man starving. The pup at her side was not just any creature she had rescued. She had touched the future alpha. And now the Alpha King had found her. And nothing, not her husband, not the forest, not fate itself, would stop him from claiming what had been tied to him the moment she placed her hands on royal blood. The fire had burned low. Smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling, casting strange shadows across the cabin walls. Tessa stirred, blinking groggily against the dim light. The warmth of the fire had lulled her into a shallow, dreamless sleep, but now something else stirred in her mind, an unease she couldn't shake. A low, guttural growl cut through the quiet. Her eyes snapped open. The sound came from outside, from all around the cabin. It was deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls and floor. Tessa's chest tightened. Her fingers instinctively went to the small knife she had tucked into her belt. Then another growl. And another. She froze. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. Slowly, she climbed to her feet, peering through the window. The world outside was cloaked in shadow, rain-slicked and trembling in the aftermath of the storm. Her breath caught in her throat. They were there. A circle of massive wolves, surrounding the cabin like silent sentinels. Their fur glistened with drops of rain, and their golden eyes glowed with an unholy light, cutting through the darkness. Tessa felt their gaze lock on her, unblinking and intense. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. Every story she'd ever heard about the forbidden forest flooded her mind, the legends of wolves that could tear a person apart without hesitation. Yet these creatures didn't move forward. They only watched. Then, from the center of the circle, one stepped forward. Larger than the others. His coat darker than a moonless night, streaked with silver like lightning frozen in fur. Golden eyes glimmering with something more than feral hunger. Something intelligent. Dominant. Tessa's breath caught. She couldn't look away. The wolf tilted his massive head, sniffing the air. His gaze landed on her, and a shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't just a look. It was a possession. The way he stared, she felt as if he could see every secret thought, every fear, every heartbeat. She stepped back instinctively, her heels scraping the floorboards. The other wolves shifted slightly, but none of them attacked. Their leader, the Alpha, remained perfectly still, every muscle coiled with restrained power. Tessa's hand went to her chest. Her heart was hammering. The warmth of the pup at her side, the tiny creature she had saved, seemed to anchor her, but even its presence did little to calm the fear creeping along her spine. And then the Alpha did something unexpected. He let out a low, rumbling growl, soft, but unmistakable. It was a warning. And yet, in that growl, there was something else. Something that made the hair on her arms stand on end. A recognition. The air between them felt electric, charged with a force she couldn't comprehend. Her rational mind screamed that this was a wolf. Just a wolf. Dangerous, untamed, but still, just a wolf. But she knew, deep down, that she was wrong. This was no ordinary wolf. She could feel it in the heat of his gaze, in the intensity of his presence. He radiated power, the kind of raw, dangerous energy that made her stomach tighten in fear and fascination at the same time. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his massive frame. And in that instant, something in her chest went cold. He wasn't just watching her. He was claiming her. The pup whimpered at her side, sensing the tension. Tessa knelt down, pressing a hand over its small body, trying to shield it, but it was clear even to her trembling mind that she herself was the one being observed, judged, measured. Another step from the alpha, slow and deliberate, and the floorboard seemed to shiver under the weight of his presence, even though he had not entered the cabin. His eyes never left hers. The growl rose in his throat again, this time closer, sharper, like the rumble of distant thunder. Tessa's hands shook. She didn't know whether to run, scream, or pray. She only knew one thing: she could not escape those golden eyes. A predator had found his prey. And she was it. The golden eyes were closer now. Tessa stumbled back, tripping over a broken floorboard, her pulse hammering in her ears. The fire flickered, casting long shadows across the cabin walls, but the glow was nothing compared to the heat radiating from the massive wolf before her. And then it happened. A shudder ran through the creature, his muscles coiling, rippling under the thick black fur. The cabin seemed to shrink around them. Tessa's breath caught in her throat. The growls stopped, replaced by a deep, vibrating hum that seemed to echo inside her chest. The wolf arched its back, fur bristling, and a strange, violent light shimmered in its golden eyes. Then, in a heartbeat, the impossible occurred: the massive black wolf shifted. Fur peeled away like shadows dissolving in sunlight, muscles reshaping, limbs elongating. The claws became hands. The muzzle shrank into sharp cheekbones and full lips. Golden eyes transformed into burning amber, and where once had been fur, now was human skin, tanned, scarred, and impossibly strong. Tessa gasped. The Alpha King stood before her. Towering, broad-shouldered, scars tracing the story of battles fought and won. Hair as dark as midnight fell in wild waves around his face, slightly damp from the storm outside. His eyes, those golden, molten eyes, locked on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Am mine," he said, his voice a low rumble, each syllable vibrating through the cabin, through her bones, through her very soul. Tessa's stomach dropped. What? She stammered, backing toward the far wall. I don't. But she didn't finish. Her words died in her throat as the raw power emanating from him pressed down on her like a physical force. Her heart raced, not just with fear, but with a strange, unbidden heat that spread through her chest and belly. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, measured, impossible to ignore. She could smell him now, the forest, the storm, the wolf that had been, and something uniquely him. His scent filled her senses, drawing her forward and trapping her where she was. "You can try," he said softly, almost a whisper, but the word held more weight than a shout. "You can run. You can hide. But you are mine." Tessa's hands shook. Her pulse thundered so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She wanted to flee, to escape the cabin, the forest, this man who radiated danger like a storm cloud. And yet, when she turned toward the door, her legs refused to cooperate. Kian moved faster than she could process. His hand brushed the air, and suddenly the scent of her fear, her desperation, her very soul, was all over him. He inhaled it like a predator following the trail of its prey. Before she could scream, he was at her side. "Stop," he murmured, his voice velvet and steel, brushing against her ear. I can feel you trembling. I can feel your heartbeat. You are mine, and I will not let anyone take you from me, not even yourself. Tessa's breath caught. Her mind screamed run. But her body betrayed her. She could feel the pull of him, something primal, ancient, inescapable. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. Amber eyes burned into her, a storm fiercer than the one outside, a command she couldn't deny. You saved my pup, he said quietly, almost reverently. Do you understand what you've done? Do you know what you've touched? I didn't mean, Tessa whispered, voice trembling. Kian's lips curved into a faint, predatory smile. No human saves a wolf pup in my forest without fate, without claiming me in return. He reached a hand forward, not yet touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The firelight reflected in his eyes, making them shine like molten gold. Tessa's chest tightened. Her mind screamed, this is insane. This is impossible. And yet, she couldn't look away. Because the Alpha King had found her. And he wasn't leaving. Tessa thought the cabin had been the worst of it. She thought the storm, the flight from her cruel husband, the endless terror of the forest were over. She was wrong. The forest had a new predator now. And she could feel him before she even saw him. Golden eyes. Watching. Silent. Relentless. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination at first. The trees cast strange, trembling shadows. The wind carried whispers that sounded like words. She kept catching glimpses of movement at the edge of her vision, then nothing. But she knew. Every time she turned, every time she thought she had shaken the feeling, there he was. Kian. The Alpha King. Standing, or perhaps crouched, somewhere between shadow and moonlight. Just watching. Not attacking. Not advancing. Not making a sound. Just watching. It was maddening. She wanted to scream, to run, to bury herself in the snow and hope he couldn't find her, but no matter how far she ran, how tightly she pressed her body against the trees, the amber gaze always found her. Always. And with every stare, she felt him learning her. Learning the tilt of her head, the way she held herself when frightened, the sharp inhale of her breath when she realized she was alone in the dark. It was intimate. Terrifying. And strangely, impossible to ignore. Tessa stumbled through the snow-laden forest, heart hammering, teeth chattering from cold and fear. Her wet dress clung to her, branches tore at her hair and skin, but she didn't care. All she could think about was the relentless, predatory presence following her every step. A low growl rolled through the underbrush behind her. She spun around, knife raised, ready to fight or flee. But there was nothing. And yet, when she looked back down the path, there he stood. Kian. Towering, impossibly strong, eyes burning like molten gold in the shadows. One step forward, then he melted into the darkness again. A phantom. A predator. Tessa swallowed hard. Fear tangled with something darker, something she couldn't name. His presence made her ache, not in a way she could control, not in a way she wanted to resist. She remembered the wolf pup she had saved. Her heartbeat faltered. He was connected to this creature, to her. Somehow, she knew the pup had marked her fate before she even realized it. Kian tilted his head slightly, observing her like a scholar studying the most intricate puzzle, like a hunter circling prey it could never truly let go. He smelled her fear, her uncertainty, her desperation. Every tremble of her body, every shiver of her skin, only drew him closer in spirit. Not with claws or teeth. Not yet. With golden eyes and silent power, he stalked her, circling, testing, claiming. Tessa wanted to hide. She wanted to fight. She wanted to deny the strange, twisted fascination she felt when their eyes met. But the truth was unavoidable. Every nerve in her body knew him. Every instinct whispered that she belonged to him. And Kian knew it too. Because beneath the predator's watchful gaze was something far older than any forest. Something possessive, consuming, and unyielding. He didn't need to touch her to mark her. He didn't need to strike fear into her heart. Her very soul already belonged to him. The storm had passed. The snow had quieted. The forest held its breath. And in the darkness, Kian waited. Golden eyes glowing. Watching. Circling. Learning. Claiming. Morning broke over the forest with a muted light, silver and gray, filtered through the wet branches. Tessa awoke to the sound of birds she hadn't recognized, and the crisp, biting smell of winter lingering in the air. She shivered and pulled the tattered blanket tighter around her shoulders, glancing at the pup curled against her chest. It was different. Stronger. Larger. Its fur glimmered like wet silk in the pale dawn, eyes brighter, sharper, brimming with a strange intelligence. The tiny, helpless creature she had saved from the raging river yesterday had transformed overnight. It nuzzled her, protective and loyal, and growled softly at the cabin door when a shadow fell across it. Tessa froze, her pulse skipping. The door opened slowly, but no one stepped inside. Instead, she noticed the objects left at her doorstep. Bundles of fresh food, berries, roots, and dried meat wrapped neatly in broad leaves. Small furs, soft and warm, arranged like a welcome. And carved into the wooden doorframe, ancient symbols she didn't recognize, intricate and precise, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her fingers trembled as she traced the carvings. They seemed alive, pulsing with something primal, protective. She realized, with a shiver, that this was not just a gift. It was a message. He is watching. He protects. He knows. The pup whimpered and padded to the door, ears twitching. Outside, the forest was silent, too silent. The shadows shifted unnaturally, and then she saw them, massive forms moving among the trees. Wolves. Dozens of them. They were not ordinary wolves. Their fur shone black and silver, eyes like molten gold, glowing faintly in the dawn. They moved with coordinated precision, circling the cabin, guarding it as if it were the most sacred place in the forest. And among them, unmistakable, the Alpha. Kian's presence was all around her, even without him stepping inside. It pressed against her senses like a physical weight, a mixture of danger and protection, possessiveness and power. Tessa's heart pounded. She wanted to run, to leave, to escape the magnetic pull of the forest, the Alpha, and the unnerving knowledge that she was now deeply entangled in something far beyond her understanding. And yet, a part of her, terrified, stubborn, exhausted, couldn't help but feel gratitude. The gifts were small tokens of care, yes, but they were also reassurance. She wasn't alone here. She had protection, loyalty, and, perhaps, attention she hadn't thought she'd ever deserve. The pup pressed against her feet, growling softly at the doorway, and she realized that it had chosen its position, a sentinel between her and the unknown. Tessa stepped outside, cautiously. The ground was soft with mud and fallen leaves. The carvings on the door seemed to pulse faintly as if alive. She breathed in, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she saw him. Kian had not entered the cabin, but his form appeared among the trees, massive and imposing, every inch of him radiating command. He was watching her, studying her, waiting for her to understand her place. And she did, reluctantly, fearfully, but undeniably. She was his. The realization both terrified and thrilled her. She pulled the pup closer, brushing its sleek fur as it growled softly toward the forest. The Alpha King, she knew, was out there somewhere. Invisible yet omnipresent, circling, claiming, guarding. And she could feel it, the gifts, the carvings, the wolves, they were not mere acts of kindness. They were warnings. Boundaries. Proofs. Kian's first gift had arrived. And Tessa understood, with icy certainty, that the forest, the Alpha, and the wolf she had saved were no longer separate entities. They were now intertwined with her life, her fear, her pulse, and her fate. She was in his world. And he was already marking it. The forest had never felt smaller, or larger, than it did that morning. Every rustle, every whisper of wind seemed amplified. Tessa's pulse raced, her senses on high alert. The pup patted nervously at her side, ears flat against its head, growling softly at the shadows between the trees. She had to see him. She had to confront the Alpha King. Her legs carried her to the edge of the clearing where he always appeared, always watching, always waiting. The golden eyes appeared first, cutting through the fog, burning like molten fire. "You're here again," she said, her voice trembling despite herself. "Why won't you leave me alone?" The forest held its breath. Kian stepped from the shadows, silent as a shadow himself, the storm of power around him palpable. His gaze fixed on her with that same intensity, that same unyielding hunger. He didn't answer her words. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he inhaled. He was smelling her. Not just her presence. Not just the scent of fear, sweat, and lingering tears. He was inhaling her soul, every molecule of her being, mapping her essence like a predator savoring prey before striking. Tessa's breath caught. Her knees felt weak. I'm not yours," she said, voice firmer than she felt. "I don't belong to anyone." He took a slow step closer. Then another. The golden eyes never left hers. With each movement, he seemed to grow larger, more imposing, more terrifyingly beautiful. "You are mine," he said, softer this time, almost reverently. "And yet, you do not know it yourself." Tessa's hands shook. Her stomach tightened with fear and something darker, something she dared not name. "You can't, this is wrong. I don't even understand any of this." He smiled faintly, a predator's smile, sharp, knowing, dangerous. "Understand? Perhaps. Or perhaps you will simply feel it. The bond between us is older than this forest. Older than your world. It binds us together whether you choose it or not." She shook her head, taking a step back. "No. That's impossible. I'm human. You, whatever you are, you're—" Her words faltered under the weight of the forest around them, the storm-scented air, and the presence of the pack silently watching in the distance. Kian's eyes narrowed, amber gold burning brighter. "Do not deny it, Tessa. Your scent called to me the moment you touched the pup. You changed everything without even knowing it. You are the anchor of my pack. The air of my forest. And I am bound to you." Something ancient seemed to hum beneath the ground, through the trees, vibrating in her chest as though the forest itself was whispering in agreement. Tessa wanted to resist. She wanted to run. She wanted to deny the pull that tightened in her chest every time his gaze met hers. And yet, with every inhale of his scent, every brush of his presence, the undeniable truth pressed on her. There was no denying it. This bond, whatever it was, ancient, dangerous, wild, already claimed her. She could feel it threading through her veins, binding her to him, to the forest, to the creatures that waited obediently in the shadows. And he stepped closer again, closing the distance between them, his presence swallowing the space like a tide. The pup whimpered and pressed against her legs, sensing the tension and the claim. "You cannot fight it," Kian murmured, voice low, velvety, edged with something primal. "You never could. You were always mine, before you even knew who I was." Tessa swallowed hard. Her heartbeat thudded painfully against her ribs. She wanted to speak, to argue, to flee. But the words would not form. Her instincts, her body, her soul, everything, told her he was right. And for the first time, fear and longing became inseparable. The dangerous bond had taken hold. And neither of them would ever be free from it again. The forest had grown quieter in the days since Tessa's arrival at the cabin. Snow softened the ground, covering the tracks of the pack, hiding her presence from prying eyes. She had begun to settle into a fragile rhythm, caring for the pup, tending the cabin, and, most dangerously, noticing the way Kian's golden gaze followed her every movement. But peace is a fragile thing. A sudden sound shattered it. Branches snapped under the weight of armored boots. Tessa froze, her heart hammering. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. The pup growled and pressed close to her legs. Hunters. She knew the scent before she saw them. The bitter, metallic tang of steel weapons, sweat, and malice clinging to men who believed they owned her, who believed they could take her back to the cruel world she had fled. Matthew's command still rang in her ears, "Bring her home, alive or dead." Tessa's chest tightened. Panic surged. She wanted to run, but she was surrounded by the forest's shadows, and she wasn't alone here. Not really. From the shadows, Kian emerged, silent and towering, his presence like a living barrier between her and the hunters. The Alpha King's coat shimmered with his wolfish power, his human form commanding the air around him. Golden eyes locked onto hers, and she felt the weight of his promise without a word spoken. "You will never go back," he said, voice low, resonant, carrying the authority of the forest itself. "Not to him. Not to anyone who would harm you." The hunters moved closer, calling her name, voices sharp with anger and entitlement. Tessa's hands trembled, clutching the pup. And then Kian let them see his true power. The wolves circled, low growls vibrating in their chests, teeth glinting in the fading light. A low wind whipped through the trees, carrying the scent of his dominance, and every hunter froze, unease crawling over their skin. Kian stepped forward, larger than life, every inch a predator, every movement calculated, controlled, lethal. He shifted slightly, the faint, impossible shimmer of his wolf form lingering at the edges of his human figure, reminding them he was no ordinary man. "Turn back," he warned, voice sharp as a blade. "You will not take her. You will not touch her. She belongs to me." The hunters laughed nervously, trying to mask their fear. "She is a runaway wife," one spat. "Your wolves can't stop men like us." Kian's eyes flared, golden and unyielding. A growl erupted from him, not a human growl, not a wolf growl, but something deeper, older, primal. The ground beneath the hunters seemed to tremble. A gust of icy wind tore through the forest, carrying the whispers of the pack, circling, surrounding, ready to strike. Tessa felt her legs lock, frozen between fear and awe. The Alpha King was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly untouchable. Mine, Kian repeated, one word, low and fatal. And in that word, every hunter knew, they would not win. They were intruders in his domain. They were nothing against him. The wolves advanced slightly, teeth bared, eyes glowing, a living wall of snarling, muscular power. The Alpha stepped closer to Tessa, hand brushing her shoulder, sending a shiver down her spine. She didn't pull away, couldn't. The pull between them was stronger than fear, stronger than logic, stronger than anything she had known before. The hunters hesitated, unease turning into panic. The forest seemed alive with the Alpha King's will. And before they could make another move, Kian shifted fully, muscles rippling, golden eyes burning with wrath. The sheer presence of him forced them back, retreating like shadows before dawn. Tessa's pulse raced, and yet, she felt safe. Protected. Consumed by the knowledge that no one could claim her but him. Kian bent slightly, his gaze softening just for her. The golden eyes that had haunted her dreams, the predator that stalked her every move, now radiated a quiet, possessive promise. "You are safe," he murmured, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "And you will never return to him. Not ever. Not while I draw breath." Tessa's lips parted, unsure whether to speak or simply surrender to the warmth that flooded her chest. The forest fell silent once more. The hunters had fled, but the warning had been clear. Kian's claim was absolute, eternal, and terrifyingly beautiful. And Tessa realized, she was bound to him now, body, mind, and soul. The dangerous game had begun, and there was no turning back. The storm had settled into a relentless winter, draping the forest in snow and silence. Icicles hung like jagged teeth from the roof of the cabin, frost creeping up the windows, trapping Tessa inside. She had long since stopped trying to leave, knowing that even a short journey into the blizzard could cost her life. Yet the cabin never felt empty. Kian was always there. Not as a wolf, not prowling the shadows, but as a man, towering, powerful, and impossibly still. He would sit silently by the fire, one hand resting on his knee, amber eyes watching her every movement. Not intrusively, not cruelly, yet every glance carried the weight of ownership, of an unspoken command. Tessa hated herself for the way her pulse quickened when she caught him staring. Her body betrayed her fear, betraying the instinct to flee. And yet, in the frozen quiet of the cabin, a warmth unlike the fire bloomed inside her, a warmth she neither wanted nor knew how to resist. "You stay too long," she said one evening, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled despite her efforts at firmness. "I cannot leave you unprotected," he replied, his tone low, calm, deadly certain. His gaze softened for only a fraction of a second before sharpening again. "Not while the forest breathes and hunters still roam." Tessa clenched her fists. "I don't need guarding." Her words were sharp, defensive, but the way she shivered betrayed her. Not from cold, but from the intensity of his presence. He rose slightly, the firelight catching the lines of his scarred face, the wild set of his dark hair. "You've been in danger since the moment you fled your husband. Every breath you take outside this cabin risks your life. I will not allow it. You belong to no one but me." Tessa froze. The words echoed in the small room, sinking into her bones like ice and fire at once. She had expected threats, intimidation, maybe anger, but not this. This possessive, careful, predatory devotion that filled every corner of the cabin. The pup shifted at her feet, curling closer to her legs as if sensing the tension between them. Each night was worse. The tension coiled tight in the small cabin. Kian would not touch her, not yet, but every subtle movement, every brush of his shoulder against the doorframe, every inhalation of her scent left her reeling. And he was patient. Calculating. Watching. Learning. Sometimes, he would step closer to the fire and sit with his back to her, yet Tessa could feel his gaze on her, tracing her shape, memorizing the tilt of her head, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the curve of her jaw. Every motion, every breath, every tremble of her body was catalogued in the depths of his mind. "You're trembling," he said one night, finally breaking the quiet. His voice was a growl wrapped in silk, low and intimate. "Do not hide it. Do not fight what you are feeling." "I'm not," her voice cracked, betraying her. She shook her head, heart racing, trying to push down the heat that rose from the way he looked at her. "I'm fine." "No," he corrected softly, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating off him. "You are not fine. You are tense. Afraid. Alive in a way that refuses to lie. And he paused, letting the word linger like a threat and a promise. "I am bound to it. To you." The fire flickered between them, shadows dancing across his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the scars, the raw masculinity that made her pulse hammer. Tessa wanted to retreat, to tell him to leave, to run, but her limbs refused to obey. For the first time, the cabin felt smaller than the space between them. Every breath, every glance, every subtle movement carried weight, charged with something she could not name but could not deny. The snow fell heavier outside, burying the world in white silence. The forest lay still, and in the quiet, two lives collided, bound by danger, desire, and a connection neither could fully control. Tessa realized, with both dread and an impossible thrill, that winter had trapped more than her body inside the cabin. It had trapped her heart. With the Alpha King. The cabin smelled of snow, smoke, and winter pine, but beneath it all lingered the faint, wild scent of Kian, rich, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Tessa shivered beneath her thin blanket, her body trembling not just from the cold but from a fever that had crept over her in the night. She had ignored it at first, brushing aside chills and aches, thinking herself strong enough to endure. But by morning, the fever had taken hold. Her head throbbed, each pulse a hammer striking against her temples. Her limbs were leaden, and every breath felt like inhaling ice. The pup whimpered softly at her side, whining as if sensing her weakness, nuzzling her trembling hands. She tried to push it away gently, but the tiny creature pressed closer, insistent and protective. Then the cabin door creaked open. Kian entered silently, as always, but this time he carried something, a bundle of fresh herbs, wrapped in a large, damp cloth, their earthy scent mingling with the sharp winter air. "Tessa," he murmured, voice low and warm, like a fire flickering against the storm outside. "You've taken too much on yourself. You cannot fight the cold, the forest, and yourself at the same time." She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her voice barely a rasp. "I'm fine." He stepped closer, ignoring her protests. His golden eyes softened, though the intensity never left them, and he placed the herbs gently on the table beside her. "No. You are not fine. And you will not suffer alone." Before she could protest further, he leaned down, his broad hands lifting her gently. His body was warm, impossibly strong, radiating heat that seeped into her chilled bones. He carried her to the small bed near the fire, laying her down carefully, every motion deliberate, protective, reverent. The pup settled immediately at the foot of the bed, curling tightly, growling softly at anyone who dared approach. The other wolves in the forest, still circling beyond the cabin, were silent, watching, guarding. Kian knelt beside her, brushing damp strands of hair from her fevered face. "You will take these herbs," he said, crushing the leaves into a warm tea. He pressed the cup to her lips gently. "Drink, or I will not leave you." Her fingers closed weakly around the cup. She drank, tasting the bitter earthiness of the mountain herbs and the faint salt of his scent that clung to the air. Heat bloomed in her chest, not just from the tea, but from him, from the way he hovered so close, guarding her like a predator over his mate. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to deny the pull that coiled in her chest every time he breathed near her. But she could not. And neither could he. He leaned down further, close enough that his hair brushed her forehead. "Do not try to hide from me," he whispered. "I can feel every fevered pulse. Every tremor. Every shiver. You are mine, Tessa. And I do not allow suffering." The pup whimpered, shifting to press even closer to her legs, resting its head against her ankle. Kian's hand moved to the small of her back, warming her, grounding her, a tether between human and beast. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows across the cabin, illuminating his sharp features, his scarred chest, his unyielding presence. He stayed with her through the night, kneeling beside the bed, adjusting the blankets, murmuring softly, sometimes brushing damp strands of hair from her face. And when the storm outside howled, when the snow pressed against the windows like a living thing, Tessa realized she was not alone. She was surrounded. By the pup, by the Alpha's pack, by the wild power that Kian exuded in every glance, every movement. And most importantly, by him. She felt it then, stark and undeniable, that this beast, this predator who stalked, watched, and claimed, was now a tether to her survival. He was fire and warmth. Protection and danger. Desire and inevitability. And as she drifted into fevered sleep, she felt his hand remain on her, grounding, possessive, and utterly inescapable. The beast would not leave her side. And she would not want him to. The fire crackled in the small cabin, throwing flickering shadows across the walls. Tessa sat curled on the worn wooden bench, wrapped in one of the furs Kian had left her, staring into the flames. The pup slept beside her, chest rising and falling in steady, contented rhythm. She had hoped for a moment of peace, a quiet pause in the chaos that had become her life. But Kian had other plans. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes glowing like molten gold in the firelight. He did not enter the cabin immediately. Instead, he studied her, patient, intense, and utterly unreadable. The quiet stretched until it felt heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "There is something you must understand, Tessa," he said. "Something you need to know." She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. The firelight danced across the sharp lines of his face, the scars that told of battles fought and won, the amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, each movement measured, predatory yet reverent. "The pup, the one you saved in the river." Tessa's stomach tightened. I didn't know what to do, he was drowning." Kian's jaw tightened. His gaze softened briefly, though the golden fire in his eyes never dimmed. "He is my nephew." Her breath caught. "Your nephew?" "Yes," he said, voice low, a growl beneath the words that made her pulse quicken. The blood of the royal wolf line flows through him. By saving him, you did more than rescue a helpless pup, you invoked an ancient bond, one that ties a human to their king. Tessa blinked, trying to process. A bond? What does that mean? Kian's expression darkened, the intensity of his presence pressing against her like the weight of the forest itself. It means that the moment you touched him, the pact was sealed. A human who saves the heir of the wolf kingdom awakens a connection older than any forest. A connection that binds you to me. Whether you wish it or not. Her hands trembled, gripping the fur blanket tighter. I don't understand. How could this happen? It is not meant to be understood in human terms, Kian said, kneeling to place a hand on the pup, who stirred and nuzzled his fingers instinctively. It is primal. Ancient. The bond does not require consent, though it can be nurtured. You were chosen by fate the moment your hands met his fur. Tessa's pulse thundered. Chosen, by you? His lips curved into a faint, almost predatory smile. Not by me. By the forest. By the wolves. By the line of kings before me. I am merely the alpha. The guardian. The enforcer of what the bond decrees. She swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation pressing on her chest. So, this bond, it ties me to you. To this forest? Yes, he said simply, his golden eyes locking onto hers. And it is unbreakable. Dangerous. Consuming. And yet, necessary. For you. For me. For the heir you saved. The pup whimpered softly, shifting to curl against her feet, as if emphasizing the truth in Kian's words. Tessa's breath caught in her throat. She had not chosen this. She had only tried to save a life. Yet now, she realized, everything had changed. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, listening, approving, warning. The shadows flickered against the walls as Kian moved to sit across from her, his gaze never leaving hers. You belong to the forest now, he murmured. To the pack. To me. And the bond will not let you go. Tessa's chest tightened. Fear and awe warred within her, but beneath it all was an undeniable pulse of something she could not resist, something dangerous, magnetic, and utterly consuming. And as the fire crackled between them, and the pup slept quietly at her side, she understood the truth of the forest, the pup, and Kian himself. She was no longer a human wandering alone. She was part of something older, wilder, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She was bound. To the Alpha King. To the forest. To destiny itself. The forest had grown quiet under a shroud of freshly fallen snow, yet Tessa could feel the tension in the air, coiling around her like a living thing. The cabin felt smaller than ever, walls closing in with the weight of the secrets Kian had revealed. She hugged the pup to her chest, its warmth grounding her as her mind raced. You never told me everything, she said, her voice trembling, though she tried to sound steady. Why now? Why all of this? Kian's golden eyes, piercing and unyielding, softened just slightly. He approached her slowly, each movement predatory yet purposeful, the faintest hum of his wolf beneath the human form vibrating through the cabin. It is time you know the truth, he said, his voice low, powerful, filled with authority. Your presence here is no accident, Tessa. Your scent, your touch, it awakened a prophecy that has lain dormant for generations. Tessa stiffened. A prophecy? She echoed, incredulous. You mean to tell me, all of this, wolves, you, the forest, it's because of some legend? Yes, Kian said simply. He knelt beside her, the firelight glinting off the scars on his chest. A human woman with a wounded heart will tame the king of beasts. She will calm the storm within the Alpha and claim his heart, willingly or not. The bloodline of the forest has awaited this. And you, Tessa, have been chosen. Her chest tightened, disbelief and fear warring with something darker stirring within her. I'm not anyone's prophecy. I'm just, me. I don't belong to this forest. I don't belong to you. Kian's expression darkened, not in anger, but in the intensity of inevitability. He moved closer, his hand brushing her arm, warm and grounding, yet impossible to ignore. You do, whether you admit it or not. From the moment you saved my nephew, the bond was sealed. Fate does not ask permission, Tessa. And neither do I. The pup stirred, nuzzling against her, sensing the energy radiating between them. Outside, the forest seemed to lean closer, listening, approving, as if the trees themselves recognized the truth. Tessa's hands shook. I can't be the one to tame you. You already have, Kian interrupted, voice low and velvet with power. Your courage, your defiance, your unwillingness to submit without question, it draws the wild from me. You are the only one who can walk beside me without fear and without breaking. That is why you are mine, as I am yours. She turned away, pressed her palms to her face, trying to resist the pull that tightened in her chest. Yet when she dared to glance back, he was there again, golden eyes piercing hers, heat and authority radiating in waves. You do not understand, he said softly, almost a whisper, leaning closer. You think this is a choice. It is not. It is prophecy. It is bond. It is fire and blood. And it is yours to claim, as much as it is mine to give. Tessa's heart raced uncontrollably, each beat echoing through her chest like the drums of an ancient ritual. Fear mingled with longing, defiance entwined with fascination. I won't. I can't just belong to you, she said, voice barely audible, a tremor betraying her. You already do, Kian replied, his hand finally settling on hers, warm, strong, possessive. The forest, the wolves, the prophecy, and I, we are bound. There is no turning back. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently, wrapping the forest in white, but inside the cabin, fate pressed closer, unyielding. Tessa realized, with equal parts terror and awe, that the prophecy had chosen her. And the king of beasts had already claimed her. Her resistance was not over, but it was only the beginning of a dangerous, consuming, and inevitable bond. The forest, which had been a sanctuary for Tessa, was no longer safe. Smoke curled through the treetops, acrid and choking, carrying the stench of fire and destruction. The wind carried it into the cabin, stinging her eyes and filling her lungs. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. No, she whispered, clutching the pup tightly. No, they can't. But she knew. She knew the hunters were coming, not just the random trespassers from before, but her husband's men. Soldiers trained to obey, to kill, to claim. And they had found their trail. Outside, the crackle of flames mingled with the crunch of boots on the snow-laden forest floor. The pack stirred, low growls vibrating through the cabin walls. The pup whimpered and pressed against her, sensing the looming threat. Kian appeared beside her as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves, silent, imposing, and terrifyingly calm. His golden eyes glowed brighter than the fire, scanning the windows, the doorway, every shadow beyond the cabin. "They're close," he murmured, voice low and resonant, carrying the promise of wrath. "And they mean to kill me, to take you." Tessa swallowed, her fear twisting into panic. "We can't fight them, Kian, there are too many." Kian's lips curved into a faint, predatory smile. "Let them come. I am no ordinary man. I am the Alpha King. And they will learn why no one crosses into my forest, and no one touches what is mine." The cabin door burst open, splintering wood against the onslaught of armed soldiers. Flames licked the forest beyond, smoke curling into the room as the intruders entered, weapons raised. "Tessa! Come back to me," a commanding voice shouted. It was him, her cruel husband, anger and entitlement dripping from every syllable. "You belong to me, not to this creature." Kian stepped forward, every movement deliberate and powerful. The pup growled fiercely, bristling with feral intensity. Shadows shifted along the cabin walls as the rest of the pack appeared, massive wolves with glowing amber eyes encircling the intruders, teeth bared and growls rolling deep in their throats. "Back," Kian warned, his voice low, vibrating with authority that made the very air tremble. "Step another inch, and you will not leave this forest alive." The soldiers faltered. The air around Kian seemed to shimmer with a preternatural power, an aura of dominance and raw authority that made every rational thought flee. "You cannot fight me," her husband screamed, stepping forward, pointing a sword at Kian. "I will drag you back to him." The pup growled louder, and Kian's eyes flared like molten gold. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You will not touch her. You will not threaten her. I am her protector, her alpha, and her claim. And I will tear anyone apart who tries to defy that." The wolves lunged, encircling the intruders in a whirlwind of fur, teeth, and unrelenting power. Snow was kicked up in white clouds as claws dug into frozen earth. The soldiers stumbled, fear overtaking their resolve, as Kian moved with inhuman speed and precision. Every movement was lethal, every action decisive. Tessa stood frozen, clutching the pup as chaos unfolded. Her heart raced, part of her afraid, part of her entranced by the raw power of the Alpha King. He was terrifying, unstoppable, and utterly devoted to her. Her husband's eyes met hers through the chaos. Rage, entitlement, and desperation burned in them. "You'll regret this," he shouted. "I will." "You will do nothing," Kian interrupted, voice low and dangerous. He stepped between Tessa and her husband, his presence radiating dominance, his golden eyes locked on the man like molten daggers. "She belongs to me. And I will not allow anyone to take her. Not now, not ever." The intruders faltered under the weight of his command. The pack howled in unison, a chorus of threat and power, echoing through the forest like a living weapon. The fire outside the cabin crackled, reflecting the chaos, as if the forest itself had risen in defense of its alpha and the woman bound to him. Tessa realized then, with a mixture of awe and terror, that there was no force in the world that could claim her from Kian. Not her husband, not his soldiers, not fate itself. She was protected. Claimed. Bound. And the Alpha King would ensure that nothing, and no one, would ever take her from him. The snow fell heavily, blanketing the forest in white, but it did nothing to soften the roar of war. Flames from the burning outskirts of the forest reflected on the snow, flickering like hellfire as Kian's pack emerged from the shadows. Massive wolves, muscles rippling beneath thick fur, fangs bared, growls rumbling like thunder, surrounded the intruders. Tessa stood at the edge of the cabin, the pup pressed tightly against her chest, eyes wide in both horror and fascination. Her husband's soldiers had not expected this. The forest had always been their hunting ground, but tonight it fought back. They're wolves," one soldier gasped, clutching his weapon, fear cutting through his bravado. "Just animals." Kian stepped forward, golden eyes blazing, and the air seemed to shift around him, heavy with dominance, raw power, and predatory intent. He didn't shout, didn't run, he simply stepped into the snow, and the world seemed to tremble. "Step closer," he warned, voice low, dangerous, each word carrying the weight of command. "And you will regret it." The soldiers charged. Their fear was quickly replaced by panic as the wolves lunged in perfect coordination. Snow and blood mixed as claws tore through boots and armor, teeth sinking into flesh. The cries of men echoed through the forest, swallowed by the roars of the pack. Tessa's stomach twisted in horror. She wanted to look away, to shield her eyes, but she couldn't. Every movement, every clash, every growl reverberated through her chest like a pulse she couldn't ignore. Then Kian transformed. It was not gradual. It was sudden. The human form she had come to fear and desire blurred, expanded, and shifted. Muscle and fur replaced skin and clothing, claws extending, fangs gleaming in the firelight. The Alpha King became a beast of myth and nightmare, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, golden eyes glowing with fury, every motion fluid and lethal. The soldiers froze, panic ripping through them like wildfire. One swung a sword, but Kian moved faster than thought, knocking the weapon aside with a swipe of massive, clawed paws. Another tried to flee, only to find himself lifted effortlessly into the air, thrown clear into the snow, coughing and screaming. Tessa gasped, pressed the pup closer. Blood spattered against the pristine snow, painting the world in scarlet streaks. The smell of iron and fur, of fear and winter, filled her senses. She was terrified. And yet, in the midst of horror, a pulse of awe and attraction surged through her. Kian's wolf form moved with brutal precision, protecting her with every strike, every leap, every roar. He was no longer merely a man, or merely a wolf. He was predator, king, and protector all in one. Every movement screamed possession, dominance, and devotion. "You are safe," his voice rumbled, though the words came through the primal growls of the beast. "No one touches what is mine." Tessa's knees weakened. She had never seen such ferocity, such raw power, channeled solely to protect her. Every instinct screamed to flee, to hide, but she was rooted in place, unable, and unwilling, to look away. The soldiers tried to regroup, but the pack had already encircled them, fangs flashing, eyes glowing like embers. The forest itself seemed alive with the Alpha's fury, shadows twisting and moving as if obeying his command. Kian lunged at a man stepping too close to the cabin, and the world blurred with movement. Snow flew, screams rang out, and the pup barked furiously, protective and loyal at her feet. And when the Alpha's golden eyes met hers across the chaos, a shiver ran through her body. He was hers. His rage, his power, his dominance, all directed at protecting her. And she had never felt more alive, or more claimed. The fight raged around them, blood staining the snow, roars echoing in the darkness, and Tessa realized something undeniable: in this forest, with this beast, with this Alpha, there was no escape. And she did not want one. The forest had fallen silent after the chaos of battle, leaving only the soft hiss of snow and the distant crackle of dying fires. The cabin, once a place of precarious safety, now smelled of smoke, blood, and sweat. Tessa sank to her knees beside the bed, her hands trembling as she examined Kian. He lay sprawled, half human, half beast, his golden eyes closed, chest rising and falling in ragged rhythm. A deep gash ran across his side, bleeding freely, fur matted with blood and snow. Every instinct in her screamed that he was too powerful, too indestructible, but now, lying here, he was vulnerable. Fragile. Human. You can't die," she whispered, pressing a trembling hand to his shoulder. The Alpha King, the predator, the man who had terrified and captivated her, looked impossibly small and mortal in the soft lamplight. The pup whined and nudged her hand, circling closer to Kian as if sensing the depth of his wound. The other wolves lingered just outside, their low growls a warning to the world that no one would dare enter. Tessa's fingers worked frantically, using the mountain herbs Kian had shown her to clean and bandage the wound. Every brush of her hand against his scarred skin, every careful movement, sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to steady her breathing, to focus on the task, but the heat radiating from his body, the steady rise and fall of his chest, made it impossible to think clearly. Hours passed. The storm outside raged, snow piling against the cabin walls, but inside, time seemed to stretch and warp around the two of them. Finally, Kian stirred. His golden eyes fluttered open, briefly confused, then sharpened as they landed on her. "Tessa," his voice was low, strained, barely a whisper, but it carried power even in weakness. You shouldn't. "I can't lose you," she said, voice cracking. "Not like this. Not ever." His lips twitched in a faint, feral grin. "You do not know," his fingers flexed, brushing her hand as though claiming her even in his pain. "Mine, always mine." Even in his semi-conscious state, the wolf within him stirred. The primal instinct, ever dominant, pressed against her, seeking to mark her, to stake his claim. She felt it in the heat of his body, the subtle shift of his muscles, the low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Tessa's pulse raced. Fear, desire, and awe collided in a heady mix. She was terrified of him, terrified of the raw power, of the dominance, of the claim, but she was drawn to it, drawn to him in ways she didn't fully understand. "Stay with me," Kian murmured, voice thick with pain and authority. "Do not leave. Never leave. The bond, it ties us, and I will not." She pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the faint rhythm of life beneath fur and muscle, beneath scar and beast. "I'm here," she whispered. "I won't leave you. Not now, not ever." The pup nudged her again, curling at her feet, and even the wolf instinct seemed to settle slightly, satisfied by her presence. As the hours wore on, Tessa worked tirelessly to keep him warm, to stem the bleeding, to soothe the beast within him. Each touch was a mix of fear and fascination, care and undeniable attraction. Every glance they shared carried weight, every breath a silent acknowledgement of the bond that tied them together, human, wolf, and alpha alike. Finally, as the storm outside began to wane, Kian's breathing evened, his eyes fluttered closed again, and a low, contented growl rumbled in his chest. He shifted slightly, pressing closer, unconsciously staking his claim even in slumber, the heat of his body radiating through the small cabin. Tessa watched him, chest heaving with adrenaline, desire, and fear. She realized with a shiver that he was not just Alpha King. He was predator, protector, mate. And she was bound to him, irrevocably, physically, and spiritually. She leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from his face, and whispered softly, "You're mine too, Kian. Mine, just as much as I am yours." Even in sleep, even in wound and weakness, the wolf within him agreed. And for the first time, Tessa understood the true depth of the bond she had unknowingly invoked. The fire flickered low, casting golden shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the snow had begun to settle, blanketing the forest in quiet white silence. Inside, Tessa sat on the floor beside the bed, the pup curled against her legs, her hands resting lightly on Kian's scarred chest. He was weak, still pale from his wound, yet alive, breathing, his golden eyes flickering open intermittently. "You're awake," she whispered, relief and fear mixing in her voice. He shifted slightly, groaning, but the movement carried a surprising grace. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since they had met, he looked human, not just alpha, not just beast, but a man. A man who was utterly captivated by her. "Tessa," his voice was low, rough with pain and exhaustion, yet threaded with something deeper, something raw. "There is something I must tell you." She tightened her hold on the pup, bracing herself. "What is it?" He drew a shallow breath, golden eyes burning with a heat that belied his weakness. "I did not track you because of the bond alone." "Not entirely." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" His hand reached for hers, fingers brushing hers with deliberate softness. "When I found you, when I smelled your fear as you fled that night, it broke something in me. I have hunted, I have claimed, I have ruled this forest for years, but nothing ever stirred me like the scent of your terror. Something, primal, something I cannot name, awakened inside me." Tessa's chest tightened. Her pulse raced. You chose me," she whispered, incredulous, heart pounding in her ears. Kian's lips curved into a faint, feral smile. "Yes." He winced at the movement but held her gaze. "Not because the prophecy demanded it. Not because the bond forced me, but because I wanted you. Because the forest could not have held you, could not have tamed you, could not have made you mine, but I could. And I did." Tessa's fingers trembled, brushing the edge of his jaw. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, voice hoarse but intense. "Just know. I chose you. From the moment I saw you, from the moment you ran into the storm, I chose you. And nothing will ever take you from me. Not your husband. Not hunters. Not fate. Not even the forest itself." Her heart throbbed, a mix of awe, fear, and desire. The man lying before her, the Alpha King who could rip men apart with a thought, who carried the strength of generations and the power of a beast, had chosen her, entirely, irrevocably, intentionally. Her voice faltered, but she could not look away from his golden eyes, from the intensity that radiated from him even in weakness. I think I've always known you would." He let out a low, almost feral growl, his lips hovering dangerously close to hers. "Good," he whispered. "Because I will not ask again. I do not give choices. You are mine. And I am yours. Whether you accept it, resist it, or fear it, it does not matter. You are mine." Tessa's breath caught, heat flooding her body, fear and desire intertwining in ways she had never felt. The pup stirred, nuzzling closer, and the wolf within him shifted slightly even in rest, marking, claiming, asserting a silent dominion that left her both terrified and captivated. I am yours," she whispered, voice barely audible, trembling with a mix of awe, surrender, and something darker, deeper. Kian's hand tightened around hers, golden eyes glowing brighter even in weakness, and for the first time, Tessa understood the full depth of the Alpha King's confession. He had chosen her. Not because he had to. Not because destiny demanded it. But because he could not resist her. Because she had broken something in him that nothing else could touch. And in that truth, in that confession, the bond between them ignited, not just prophecy, not just instinct, but desire, possession, and the undeniable pull of two souls, human and beast, claiming one another completely. The cabin was quiet now, save for the soft hiss of the dying fire and the steady breathing of the pup at Tessa's feet. Snowflakes tapped softly against the windowpanes, casting fleeting shadows across the walls. Tessa's heart raced, not from fear this time, but from the heat and tension that had been building for weeks, since the first night she had stumbled into the forbidden forest, since the moment she had seen Kian's golden eyes, since the moment she had felt the unbreakable pull of the Alpha King. She knelt beside him on the bed, her hands brushing against his scarred chest. He looked at her, still recovering from his wounds, but his presence was more commanding than ever. Even weakened, he radiated power, alpha, predator, protector, and mate. And for the first time, Tessa felt a clarity she had fought to deny. She wanted him. She began, voice trembling, but Kian silenced her with a low, deliberate growl. No words, Tessa. Actions only, he murmured, voice hoarse, dangerous, and intoxicating. Her breath caught as he shifted slightly closer, the heat of his body seeping into hers. Golden eyes locked on hers, unblinking, possessive, and filled with an intensity that made her knees weaken. Every instinct screamed both warning and desire, a primal tension that had been building since their first encounter. And then, she let go. She leaned forward, her lips brushing his in a tentative kiss. It was soft at first, a whisper of contact, but the moment their mouths met, it became an avalanche of sensation. Kian's hands tightened on her waist, pulling her closer, his fangs grazing her lower lip in a teasing, feral promise. She shivered, her body responding to the power and dominance in him, surrendering to the pull she had fought for so long. I'm yours, she whispered against his lips, voice trembling but filled with conviction. I am yours, Kian. His growl rumbled through the cabin, vibrating in her chest like a drumbeat of possession. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in, tasting her scent, marking her in ways that went far beyond words. You are mine, he murmured, voice hoarse with need and authority. And now, you will carry my mark. Before she could react, he leaned in and brushed his lips to the delicate line of her throat. A shiver of heat ran through her as his fangs grazed her skin, just enough to leave the faintest impression, a searing tingle that spread through her body. The wolf within him stirred, instinctively claiming, marking, binding. Tessa gasped, clutching him, the sensation both painful and intoxicating, like fire licking through her veins. It was not just a bite, it was a seal, a promise, an irrevocable claim. The connection between them flared, golden light from his eyes blending with the heat of the mark, binding human and alpha together in a bond older than the forest itself. I feel it, she whispered, head spinning. I feel you, inside me. Yes, he growled, pressing closer, his wolf instinct fully aligned with his desire. And I feel you, in me. Bound. Mine. Forever. This mark, our bond, it cannot be broken. The pup whined softly, curling against her feet, a silent witness to the sealing of fate. Outside, the forest seemed to exhale, approving, the snow glowing faintly in the moonlight as if the earth itself recognized their union. Tessa pressed her lips to his again, tasting the heat, the power, the dominance, and the tenderness all at once. She had fought, denied, and feared, but now she surrendered fully. No walls, no fear, no hesitation remained. Kian's arms wrapped around her, holding her close, his heartbeat thundering against hers, his golden eyes softening just slightly. "You are mine," he repeated, a growl of satisfaction and devotion vibrating in his chest. "And I will protect you, claim you, and worship you, for as long as I live. You are the queen of my heart, my pack, and my forest." Tessa's heart surged, joy and awe flooding through her. "And you are mine," she whispered. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of snow, fire, and the Alpha King. Inside the cabin, heat and desire mingled with the unbreakable, ancient bond that now tied them together. The king had marked his mate. And their fate was sealed. The snow had finally melted, leaving the forest reborn. Streams gurgled where ice had once ruled, and buds peeked from branches, tentative and trembling in the spring sun. The air smelled of damp earth, of pine, and of life returning after a long, harsh winter. Birds trilled above, heralding the season of renewal, and the forest seemed to hum with quiet anticipation. Tessa stepped out of the cabin, her bare feet brushing against the soft moss and thawed ground. The furs that had wrapped her through storms now fell gracefully around her shoulders, more like a crown than a blanket. The pup, now grown into a strong wolf with golden eyes like his uncle, trotted alongside her, chest proud, tail high. She breathed in the crisp, fresh air and felt it fill her body, sweeping away fear, hesitation, and doubt. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into the forbidden forest. She was something new, something stronger. Something wild. The forest responded to her presence, leaves rustling in whispered greetings, flowers turning toward her as if recognizing their queen. Wolves emerged from the shadows, surrounding her in respectful silence. Kian approached, still in human form, his golden eyes soft and tender as they locked on hers. He did not need to speak. She could feel his pride, his devotion, the bond pulsing between them, stronger than ever. "You," she breathed, voice trembling with awe, "the forest, it obeys me." Kian smiled, stepping closer, letting his hand brush against hers. "No," he said softly, his voice low, rich with reverence. "It obeys us. You are its heart now, Tessa. The queen. And I am yours, as always." The pup growled softly, rubbing against her leg, and the rest of the pack settled around her in quiet submission. They recognized the bond, the claim, and the unity that now existed between human and alpha. The forest itself seemed to bend to her will, trees swaying slightly, streams sparkling more brightly, flowers blooming in radiant colors that had been absent all winter. Tessa closed her eyes and lifted her arms slowly, letting the forest's energy flow through her, filling her veins with life and power. She could feel it, the pulse of the earth, the rhythm of the pack, the heartbeat of the Alpha King beside her. Kian knelt before her, bowing his head just slightly, lips brushing the top of her hand. "You are my mate," he whispered, reverent yet possessive. "My heart. My queen. My bond. And nothing, no one, will ever take you from me." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were of awe, of gratitude, and of love. She had found her place, her purpose, and her heart. Stepping fully into the open, she looked around at the forest, the pack, and the man who had chosen her. "I am yours," she said softly, voice carrying through the trees, echoing with the certainty of the bond. "And I belong here. To you. To the pack. To the forest." Kian rose beside her, towering and magnificent, golden eyes glowing with pride and devotion. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, and she felt the spark of the ancient bond flare between them once more. The wolves howled, a chorus of loyalty and reverence, and the forest itself seemed to celebrate the union. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the trees and snow-melted earth. Flowers bloomed more brightly in that light, streams sparkled like crystal, and the wind carried whispers of renewal, life, and devotion. Tessa stepped forward, confident, radiant, wild, and fully claimed. The forest bowed to her presence. She was the Wolf Queen, the Alpha King's fated mate, and the keeper of a bond older than time itself. And for the first time, she felt truly, undeniably free. Kian's hand tightened around hers, pulling her close. "Together," he murmured. "Together," she echoed, a smile touching her lips, fierce and unshakable. The forest had returned. And so had she. The wind whipped through the forest, carrying the scent of snow, pine, and the distant march of soldiers. Tessa stood at the edge of the cabin, the pup, now a fully grown, golden-eyed wolf, at her side. Beside her, Kian's hand rested on hers, his presence radiating raw power, dominance, and unwavering devotion. He had healed, regained his strength, and now every inch of him screamed alpha, predator, protector. "They're coming," Tessa murmured, her voice calm despite the storm of anxiety in her chest. "They always come," Kian replied, golden eyes scanning the horizon. "But this time, the forest fights with us." From the shadows, wolves emerged, their eyes glowing like molten gold, muscles coiled and ready. Trees creaked as if bending toward them, roots shifting beneath the ground, and the streams ran faster, carrying the icy force of winter's end. The forest itself had awakened, ancient and loyal, responding to its Alpha King and his fated mate. The first echoes of battle drums sounded through the distant trees. Her husband's army approached, confident and ruthless, sure that nothing in the forest could stop them. They had underestimated the fury of a man who would burn kingdoms for his mate, and the woman who had chosen him. "They think they can take you," Kian murmured, leaning close. His lips brushed her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "They will learn, they cannot." Tessa's hands tightened around his, her pulse steady. "I'm ready," she whispered. "We fight together." The army emerged into a clearing, a wall of armor and steel. At their forefront was her husband, eyes wild with rage, entitlement, and disbelief. "Tessa," he shouted, voice cracking. "Return to me. You belong to me." "No," Kian growled, stepping forward, every inch of his form radiating the command of the Alpha King. Wolves circled behind him, snarling, fur bristling, eyes glowing with feral intensity. The pup barked, then leapt forward, a flash of golden energy that seemed to strike fear into the hearts of soldiers. The ground trembled as Kian shifted, massive wolf form erupting into existence with a roar that split the air. The forest responded in kind, trees bent, roots surged, and snow and wind whipped into a protective storm around them. Her husband faltered, realization dawning too late. "No, this can't be." "Yes," Kian rumbled, his voice reverberating through the earth. "This is real. And this is where you end." The wolves charged, a wave of fur, teeth, and unstoppable force. Soldiers screamed as claws shredded armor and fangs sank with precision and fury. The forest itself rose, branches snapping down like whips, roots twisting and tripping, snow and ice blinding the attackers. Tessa watched, awe and fear mixing in her chest, but she did not look away. Beside her, Kian fought like a god of war, protecting her with every movement, every strike, every roar. The golden glow of his eyes swept over the battlefield, marking his dominance, his claim, his love. Her husband tried to reach her, stumbling forward through the chaos, but Kian's massive form intercepted him. The two men, one human, one alpha, clashed in the snow, and with one final, decisive movement, Kian threw him to the ground. The man's soldiers faltered, some surrendering, others fleeing, knowing instinctively they were no match for the fury of the Alpha King and his mate. When the battle ended, silence fell. The snow was streaked with remnants of conflict, but the forest, the pack, and the Alpha King were victorious. Kian reverted to his human form, breathing heavily, golden eyes softening only for Tessa. She stepped forward, brushing snow from her furs, and looked at the cabin that had become their home. "This is where I belong," she whispered. Kian reached for her, fingers brushing her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "With me," he said simply, voice low, reverent, and possessive. "You will always belong with me." Tears filled her eyes, not from sorrow but from the overwhelming sense of belonging, love, and safety. "Then this is my home," she replied, pressing her lips to his. "With you. Here. Now." The wolves howled in approval, the forest itself seemed to exhale, and the pup, now fully grown and regal, nuzzled against her legs, golden eyes shining with loyalty. Tessa looked at Kian, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of their bond. He would burn kingdoms for her. He would defend her against the world, the forest, and fate itself. And she would stand by him, fierce and wild, as his mate, his queen, and his equal. The cabin, once a refuge, was now a kingdom. The forest bowed to its Alpha King, and to the woman who had chosen him. And as the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the snow-melted trees, Tessa felt it in her bones. This was her destiny. This was her life. And it was perfect.